Hello! I was asked about fueling techniques for the Levi-wand. So I have not only the techniques I use for fueling, I have my fuel dumps as well to show you, and a few tips and tricks about getting started to start your fire wanding journey. Of course, there's a few safety tips and tricks that I will be incorporating in here as well, so let's get started. I've got my fire wand here with a little bit of silicone in the middle that doesn't melt. This is one wick on either side. I have this full long string. I highly recommend making sure your string is able to handle this. Kevlar string is the best. If you use dark magnesium shadow cord, that will set you right for your wanding fire journey. Also, I have this full fire wand. Also, speaking of dark wand, this is one from them. I have this one a long string setup. This one, unlike the first one, is actually wrapped with a wick all the way down. They have very different fueling techniques. Both of them require the utmost respect, as all fire does. So be sure before you light up, you are ready to go with your safety equipment in tow, including a duvetine. Do not light alone, and do not light without a safety blanket. Duvetine is a special material that is made for this. It won't immediately burn through as it's lighting out a very, very big flame on a wick of some sort, depending on the size of the wick. So you're going to want to light with that. I do not recommend taking the easy way out with a wet towel, although in an emergency situation will do the trick. It is not the ideal way. Please invest in a duvetine. So once you are set with that, double check and make sure the clothes you are wearing are also safe. And I say safe, but I mean fire friendly, because safe implies that there's no chance of them catching fire. No matter what you are wearing, the fuel and the fire can transfer. What you are looking for here are natural fibers and things on your clothing that will not melt to your skin. Nobody wants a hospital visit because their clothing has adhered to their skin. It is not pretty. There is always an inherent risk to spitting fire, so keep that in mind at all times. Of course, doing so at your own risk. Also be mindful that people are watching you and taking an example from you, and also no matter who you are, at what stage in your fire spinning, you then embark on representing a larger community. So keep your safety and the rest of the community in mind, and their image as well as you go forward in your fire journey. So like I was saying, let's make sure what you're wearing is fire safe. For most props, it's important to be mindful that you don't have a lot of extra things spinning around. For example, I would not want to spin in something with all of these little extra frilly gadgets and doohickeys, especially something shiny and reflective. Fire safety will see that often, and it will reflect the fire, so they won't know if it's you, this little bead, or the fire on you. So you might have some overly cautious safeties, as they should be, who are going to see that, and personally it will drive me nuts. And everyone who is fire spinning should also be safetying at some point, so you'll get a feel for how annoying that is if anybody leaves their keys on or something like that. So make sure you don't have anything extra to get tangled. And also, I do not recommend lots of extra fabrics, no matter how experienced you are as you move around. These are going to move, and especially with the Levi-wand, you have a lot of extra string at times that might get tangled. And once you get something caught up and under all this extra fabric, it's so easy to get stuck. And of course, you do not want fire stuck and trapped under something flowy like a dress or a very long skirt. So be mindful of what you are wearing and where it goes as far as that. But most importantly, materials. Like I said, you don't want anything to melt. Natural fibers, what I mean by that: cotton, wool, leather in particular. I'm wearing a nice leather top here. This is a great idea. Leather top, maybe matching with a skirt. If you are opposed to wearing leather, cotton like denim or a sweatshirt are perfect. So be mindful if you're creating costumes of what kind of materials you're adding to that. There are measures of safety you can add, of course, by spraying them down with special sprays to add some fire retardancy to it. There's also some people that will layer to add protection underneath, but no matter what, you're still risking that top layer melting and possibly melting through. So I recommend for fire, always erring on the side of as safe as possible. The less things get caught in, the less things that can melt on your body, the better. Also be mindful of the weave and the size of your fabric. Some fabrics might be cotton or might be wool, but might be a very large weave, which means there's lots more oxygen to fuel the fire if it doesn't stuck on it or under it. So also be mindful of the weave I highly recommend also testing any materials if the tag is not there. You might, excuse me, think you know what the material is made of, but it's always safer to, when the clothing is not on your body, of course, take a lighter to a small, discreet corner of material, see how it reacts. If it immediately melts, I would not spend fire in it. So anyways, also certain dyes, keep an eye on that, but that's the gist of what you're looking for clothing. Highly recommend putting your hair up, back, maybe a handkerchief, bandana over top of it, might cover it up if you feel more comfortable spraying it down, getting it wet. If you're doing tricks around and close to your head, mindful of the big ponytail getting caught more. Sometimes it's a matter of modifying tricks that you're used to doing without fire, to be mindful of how you're doing them on fire. I have a lot of hair, it gets caught, it's a problem. So just be mindful of where that is. Sometimes a hood is helpful. Whatever makes you feel more comfortable, it also keeps you safe. If it's about the costume, be mindful too of all of the safety measures while you're creating that. Now, about specifically fueling a Levi-wand, now that I got most of the safety things out of the way, I highly recommend, and the most often used fuels are white gas, Coleman's camp fuel, as it's known, and or lamp oil. I actually do a mix of both. With the mix, I get a little bit different and longer burn time. Also, not quite as hot as white gas. It's a little bit smokier, but I also like that it reduces fuel transfer. And fuel transfer is literally when the fuel from your prop has transferred to your clothing or whatever it may be. But that touch of say the wand to your body doing say contact wanding, when you bump it with white gas, it's pretty much that white gas and that fuel is now gone onto your clothing or your skin or whatever. Now, within a split second, you do a quick brush off. No big deal, especially if you're wearing clothes that can handle that. The idea is that the clothing does not melt in that split second before you wipe away the fire or before your safety catches and sees like, hey, back of your leg. So the shit. Where was I? So type of fuel, that's where I was. I'm gonna let that be. I'm gonna leave that in there because, hey. So fuel. Like I said, the two types of fuel there, I mix them. It is debatable and or personal preference on what to use. Like I said, it does come down to some of those little details. But especially if you're beginning, I highly recommend a mix with the lamp oil because the transfer, it's something to be mindful of. And when I have a fuel setup here, I have one toolbox for a more portable, smaller go-to, the Go firebox for most any fire performer can work out of this. It's got actually a smaller fuel bucket as well as a larger fuel dump. Both of those are great sizes depending on the wig size of the prop you're using. For example, my fans here, I need this teeny little bucket to get in there and zip those props in there. So sometimes that makes a huge difference. You're going to want to have those, and you're going to want to have, depending on your prop as well, poi in particular, a can to spin often. So say for example, if you were doing this with poi, not to develop or divert so much from Levi-wand, but you're going to put a soaked prop in a bucket like this and spin out the excess fuel. Unless you are in a situation where you can actually work the excess fuel off into your show or not run the risk of dripping on your performance. Maybe it's a sandy performance, you're not going to leave a lot of slippery floor behind you with the fuel. Perhaps you can find ways to avoid having to do that, but that's the most popular way of doing that. Of course, with the wand, I kind of do more of like a shake out of it, but I actually prefer to do it mid-show, which I will also show you what to do with that in just a moment here. I would much rather incorporate it into the show just in case I do not have the space to actually shake off, maybe in the woods, the excess fuel, or in a bucket out, maybe we're closer to a crowd. It's really the thinking of time and place and setting and what situations you might run into. My preferred way of fueling is actually my big wand fire go kit. This is a coarse golf bag, pretty easy to get at a thrift shop for not very much money, as it turns out. They even have the handy dandy function where, close up, the stems, the legs come right out. pretty handy. Come on handy, got a lot of gear to lug. I also sometimes have a fuel bucket with an extra thing of fuel as well. So you carry a lot of stuff here. I have a PVC pipe. Please make sure if you're doing this method that it is sealed extremely carefully by somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. I did not do this myself. I had somebody who's much more skilled in this do it for me. It was a great suggestion. I'm grateful for it. You don't want fuel leaking out of this, which also means you're going to make sure this lid is nice and tight. So what this means is I, right now, have very little fuel. I have not spun in quite a while. But what I would be doing here is using a flashlight, never a flame, think that through. Using a flashlight over top of this here, I would be dipping for a 2-wick wand, doesn't matter which side. First, I would be dipping them though, and being mindful of the bubbles. What you're listening for is the bubbles to stop, but you want to count until that point, so that you know when you go to the second wick, how long that you're going to want to put that second wick in. Ideally, the bubbles are going to stack at the same time, but you're also going to want to be mindful of feeling them evenly, because your wand is already set to be balanced correctly without the fuel. So when you're adding the fuel, you have to maintain that balance. That is for this type of wand. Now, when a full fire wand is in play, that kind of changes things up a little bit here. So like I said, this is a matter of dipping in the one side, listening for the bubbles, counting, and doing it on the other side. When you fuel this one up, anytime you're not using the fuel, don't put the lid back on. I almost made a mistake right there. Absolutely keep the lids on and keep them away from smokers and anybody who might not notice that they are there. My little left-handed. I haven't cleaned it in a while, it's grody. We're gonna ignore that. So, when we are fueling this, or once it is fueled, excuse me, you have a few different ways you can get the excess fuel off besides just a simple flick into the woods or your bucket, wherever away from the people you are. I like to, in a big showy place where I can spin off and maybe let a little extra fuel loose and won't cause any harm to people or to the ground and the environment around me, so it's typically an outdoors move. I really like to pull the, to kind of do the yo-yo effect. Typically, since I have a long string here, I'll wrap it up so there's a medium amount, and that'll be like a release and throw, which you'll have 2 big fire plumes come up. It's a lot of fire. Please do not try unless you are ready for a big burst of fire, perhaps a little extra fuel spray, and a safety that is ready for that as well. Please warn them. It is not fun, but they have no idea that it is coming. So that being a big dramatic way of doing it, if you want to be a little bit further from it, having it wrapped and on the ground and pulling it that way is also good. Same thing, being mindful of your environment, and if you can do that and are allowed to do that in the space you're in. Do not ruin it for the fire burners after you, who then have to spin in the excess fuel, which makes it really slippery. So just be mindful of that and the people around you. Another way you can do it that's really nice and graceful, if you are trying to also be mindful of not causing a lot of that excess fuel to spin around or on the ground. Just simply having it and doing little plumes, as a staff spinner would, also can get that little bit of excess fuel off in time to have a balanced start of your wand. So as you're doing maybe the start, you can just do some little pops, whatever you need to create that effect, to get those little moments. The full fire wand is a different beast. I have a couple methods for this. I know a few people will fuel them differently. One of them is the squeeze bottle method, where they will hold that over a bucket like this and actually, with gloves on, squeeze all the excess, or squeeze the bottle of fuel onto the wand into the bucket and squeeze that there. You can also, of course, use gloves or whatever you have to squeeze the excess fuel off of the wicks on this small wand as well. For this, if you are spinning a full fire wand and fueling that, going into the same tubing here, this is exactly why I had this, so it's for this wand. It's much, much more convenient, or another long staff if you really need to get down in there. So what I end up doing for this is fueling the bottom first, dipping it in to the halfway point, listening again for the bubbles, flipping to the other side, because what happens then is the fuel from the bottom starts to drip to the top. While it's in there fueling, naturally what's going to happen when we start to burn or even start to attempt to do anything with the wand. We're then going to let it drip. It's going to start to drip back down to the bottom where the weight's going to end up sitting and resting. So as long as you do them evenly, the idea is what little bit of drip and soak is going to happen there is minimal enough not to change the balance. And also, if the balance is off because you feel it a little bit off, don't worry, within a few seconds of burning the fuel, the excess fuel, it'll generally, unless you by a long shot over-fueled one side or under-fueled one, you're going to get it to balance itself back out pretty quickly. When you're lighting this, you're going to want to light it from the bottom, send it to the top. If you want to light along the way, go for it, but light the bottom last if that's the case. I like to typically let this one light from the bottom, like I said, in a dramatic fashion, and let it rise to the top while holding it in kind of a nice little setting there. I either do or don't. I don't usually wear gloves. A lot of people wear gloves. That's up to you and your comfort levels. If you have a protection on your arm, just remember that what you're doing with fire will always go up. So anything on your wrist, your arm, also needs to be fire friendly. And you're going to want to not have those paper wristbands or plastic wristbands at a festival on your wrist, or materials and bracelets that are going to melt or fall right off. So, you know, no paper. If you touch the wand with gloves are a great idea, especially for a full fire wand. Typically, the wicks themselves won't be very hot for a split second if you need to adjust or touch them without it. So you don't need to be as absolutely petrified to touch it if it's on fire. Now be mindful on a full fire wand of the metal strings. That is what is going to be extremely hot. So all in all, those are the kind of run through basics. Other than having all the fuel and your dump spaces for the containers for the fuel, make sure that you seal. All of these can seal really, really tight no matter where you're traveling and what you're doing. You're going to want to make sure that they are not going to open up. And also in your bucket, make sure you always have safety like burn gel and as much first aid. I kind of am finding some of mine right on top, very convenient. I also have an opener for these cans, which also handy to have if you want to get into your fuel buckets. So like I said, please reach out to me on Fire Rose on Instagram if you have any questions. I have other tutorials on YouTube if you look at Rosalie, Levi-wanding. Feel free to reach out for any private lessons or information you might have. If you're looking to know about wands, I can point you in the right direction. I have somebody that knows. I'll give you the answers myself. But yeah, just make sure you're spinning fire safely. It's a powerful tool and it's absolutely beautiful. So don't abuse it. Love it, respect it, and it will love you back. Welcome to the wand world and the burner community. We love fire and welcome.